Imagine grinding through the worst drought in 50 years, staring down a foreclosure notice, and hoping the rattling pickup lasts just one more run to town. Then out of nowhere, a luxury SUV sits crippled on the shoulder, its panicked driver begging a miracle you can barely afford to give. The next 5 minutes will fling one desperate farmer into the orbit of a woman whose songs rule the radio, and what they do beside that blown-out tire will light up headlines, unlock silent grief, and test whether real country still beats in the places Spotify cannot chart. Before we carry on, let me know where you are watching from in the comments, and hit the subscribe button for something special tomorrow. Luke Barrett smelled rain that never came. Every dawn for the last 9 days he had inhaled the metallic promise hanging above his century-old acreage, only to watch clouds shrug north toward the river valley and leave his soy rows begging. July bled into August with no mercy, splitting the red Tennessee earth into gnarled fingers that clutched at roots and snapped them clean. The cracked ground reflected his own exhaustion. 6 consecutive years of commodity losses, 2 brutal floods followed by a drought that roasted chance down to charcoal, and a stack of pink overdue notices tall enough to shim a crooked table. He sat at the kitchen counter, nursing black coffee so thin it looked like river water, tracking the leak in the ceiling that wept into a Folgers tin each time the upstairs pipe coughed remorse through corroded seams. A pair of boots, 3 sizes too large for his 15-year-old daughter Molly, waited by the door for the thrift store return trip they could no longer justify. Clara, his late wife, had sewn the sunflower curtains that framed the sagging window, and each fade-bleached petal felt like her hand still tugging him toward optimism. But optimism required feed, fuel, and an irrigation pump motor the repair tech refused to release until the past due balance cleared. So Luke hatched a barter. A half-quart of oak firewood he had cured all spring for the feed store's backroom trade sacks of cracked corn and mineral lick to keep their last goats alive through summer. It was not a sustainable answer, but Molly's 4-H project relied on those goats, and small victories kept hope breathing. He loaded the split logs into the Ford's rust-scarred bed, strapped them down with baling twine, and rolled out just after dawn, engine coughing asthmatic clouds that scattered sparrows from the fence line. 15 miles of 2-lane blacktop wound through Barrett County's folds of limestone and ironweed. Each bend held a memory. Clara teaching Molly to whistle Luke's father waving from a 1970s John Deere. Luke himself racing storms that looked kind until they flooded whole fields. Today he drove with the window down, corralling every breeze before midday heat congealed. The radio, taped to keep the tuner from sliding, crackled local news. County Fair canceled again because the river stage was too low to float the barge stage where bluegrass bands normally set up. Maybe next year, the host sighed. Luke switched it off. Next year felt as distant as Mars. Rounding Apple Creek Pass, he spotted hazard flashers pulsing amber in the hazy morning. A black Range Rover tilted to the right, rear tires shredded like confetti. Dust haloed the vehicle, and beside it stood a woman in jeans and a denim jacket, hair tied beneath a truck stop ball cap. She held up her phone, turned it one way then the other, clearly chasing a signal. Luke's conscience, tuned by generations of neighborly code, engaged a brake without consulting his anxiety. He rolled to a stop 20 feet behind the SUV. The woman pivoted, relief sweeping her features even before she saw his face. He stepped out, wiping palms on jeans gone thin at the thighs. "Mornin'," he called. "Flat?" "Exploded more like," she said, southern vowels smoothed by years on the road. Up close, Luke registered details. A small crescent scar at her left temple, nails trimmed short, and eyes a shade somewhere between hazel and stormwater. Nothing screamed wealth except the Land Rover badge, and the leather boots hiding under road dust. He knelt at the tire. Sidewall had separated completely. Steel cords winked like tiny fishhooks. "Spare?" he asked. "In the trunk, pretty sure," she answered. "I've never, I don't usually." She trailed off, embarrassed. "You'll be back on pavement in 10, he assured, voice the same low rumble he used when soothing skittish yearlings. He fetched his jack and 4-way from the truck. The woman opened the hatch, and Luke blinked at guitar cases wedged among overnight bags. Stickers plastered the larger case. Red Rocks, Austin City Limits, Grand Ole Opry. He had not attended a concert in a decade, but the names conjured faces from his youth, nights when he and Clara danced barefoot in this very truck bed. While he cranked the jack, she crouched opposite, watching. "You do this a lot?" she asked. "Mechanical mercy runs in the family," Luke said, easing off lug nuts with practiced wrist flicks. He slid off the blown tire, swapped the compact spare, and tightened the nuts in a star pattern. 50 miles tops, then a real shop, he instructed, lowering the jack. She reached for her wallet, producing 2 crisp hundreds. Luke stepped back, as if the bills were hornets. "No, ma'am. At least gas money," she insisted. He resecured his tools. "County code. You stop and help. No invoice." Her brow furrowed beneath the cap. "Well, county code where I'm headed. Says I owe you breakfast. There's a diner. 10 minutes up." Luke opened his truck door, heart tugging between time and courtesy. "Another day. Got feed to trade before old Marvin sells it." She took the bills away, disappointment shading her expression, but also something like respect. "Then tell me your name so I can brag on you." "Luke Barrett." The name landed, and though she masked it, recognition flickered across her eyes. She extended a hand. "Cass," she said, offering only half the truth, because the whole truth carried a freight of complication. He shook her hand, calluses brushing her palm. "Drive safe, Cass." He climbed into the cab. The doors squealed, drowning her reply. She watched him pull away until the dust swallowed taillights. Then she slid behind the Land Rover wheel, pulse tapping a tattoo rhythm she normally heard only before stepping on stage. She exhaled, pulled onto the highway, and stared at the road ahead, while memories of county fairs resurfaced. Memories of Barrett honey jars, bright yellow labels her mother collected for pantry decoration, back when times and I were simple. "Of all people," she whispered. The world felt suddenly small, in the best possible way. Luke made the feed store trade with minutes to spare. Marvin Pike inspected the oak pieces, grunted approval, and hefted 3 feed sacks onto the scale. "That, plus your good name, gets the lick tub," Marvin said, scribbling in a ledger. Luke signed, nodding gratitude. Outside, he fueled the truck using a prepaid card Sylvia from the credit union had mailed, after he scraped current balances into partial payments. The tank swallowed $30 worth before he halted the flow. Enough to reach Harvest maybe. On the drive home, he replayed the roadside encounter. Something about the woman's voice nagged familiarity, but he chalked it to fatigue mixed with half-remembered radio tunes. Barrett County held plenty of cousins he barely recognized. Maybe she was kin visiting unseen since childhood picnics. He shelved the thought, as the farmhouse crested into vor-battered sentinel, waiting for news that never seemed good. Molly met him outside, auburn hair pulled into a sloppy bun, freckles bright under sun. "Dad." Ms. Winthrop at the extension office left a message. "Scholarship app to Friday needs a video essay." She sounded both excited and terrified. Luke's chest tightened at her Hope College tuition, felt like a mountain beyond climb. "We'll figure it out," he promised, unloading feed into the goat shed. Dust motes danced in light shafts slicing through warped boards, each mote a tiny reminder of tasks undone. But for today, goats bleated approval, and Molly's shoulders relaxed. After supper beans, cornbread, and the last jar of Clara's canned tomatoes they sat on the porch, humidity cooling. Cicadas hummed, and Molly practiced her video script, reciting why veterinary science mattered to rural resilience. Luke corrected her posture, despite knowing judges cared more about sincerity than poise. He felt pride tighten his throat. Whatever storms raged, Molly's brilliance shone. Night settled thick. Luke couldn't sleep. He rose, retrieved Clara's photo album from the Hope chest, and leafed through county fair snapshots. Clara waving her blue ribbon preserves, Molly riding a pony, Luke himself hefting a honey frame taller than crack. Molly was then. Another photo showed a blonde preteen holding a participation ribbon in the junior talent show Cassidy Hart, according to the caption Clara had scrawled. Luke stared, then fumbled in the dark for his phone and searched the name. Headlines, magazine covers, album art flooded the screen, the same eyes behind aviator sunglasses. Now a superstar rumored to have vanished on hiatus this very year. Luke whistled low. He flipped back to Clara's caption. Cassidy Hart, sweet as peach ice cream. Sings like church angels. The coincidence felt surreal. The woman he'd helped looked older, wearier, but the smile matched. He shut the album, mind spinning like worn tractor tines. What were the odds that a ghost of county fairs past would break down in front of him 20 years later? More importantly, why was she traveling alone on back roads, disguised beneath a truck stop cap? Questions piled like logs in a jam, but one truth rose clear. He had refused money from someone who could probably buy the feed store outright. He chuckled at the irony, a sound equal parts amusement and resignation. Still, he'd stand by the refusal. Code was code. He placed the album back and returned to bed, finally drifting off as dew began stitching silver onto corn leaves outside. Cassidy Hart rolled into the Cedar Pines motor court just after noon, heartbeat still pacing the memory of Luke's handshake. She had flagged Nashville 3 weeks ago, leaving behind a stalled album, a manager nagging about streaming metrics, and a tour promoter demanding dates. Burnout felt too small a word. She was hollowed, so she traced the roads of childhood, sneaking under radar in a rental SUV, chasing silence. In her cabin, she set the battered guitar case on a quilted bedspread and opened her journal. The song fragment born beside the flat tire wanted expansion. She jotted verses about cracked soil and steadfast hands, about dignity found in refusal of payment. Each line pulsed with authenticity. Her last album lacked. She wrote until dusk, then collapsed, dreaming of sunflower curtains and laughter echoing through barns. The next morning she phoned Ty Jackson, documentary producer she trusted from previous charity specials. "I found our pilot," she said, voice shaking with conviction. Ty listened, skeptical. Season funding hinged on star power, and Cassidy's hiatus worried investors. Still, her passion convinced him. He agreed to drive up with a skeleton crew to scout. Cassidy insisted secrecy until she secured Luke's blessing. 2 days later, the Land Rover's spare tire sat bolted by the motel dumpster. She bought a full-size replacement at Ridge Mechanic Shop, ignoring the owner's slack jaw when he recognized her. By then, Ty's team had arrived, launching a reconnaissance that included drone passes over acreage, research into Barrett's debt load, and calls to feed store gossip lines confirming Luke's reliability. Cassidy feared Luke would reject cameras. She rehearsed her pitch during long walks among cedar thickets, restore the barn, pay down equipment loans, share his story as first of a series spotlighting forgotten farms. She omitted mention of the streaming deal that required her name on the headline, "Luke's integrity must come first." When producers finally convinced her to approach him, nerves coiled tighter than guitar strings tuned half-step high. She remembered his refusal of Munya Barrier High, yet noble so she replaced the offering of cash with an offer of partnership. Whether he accepted could redirect her life as well as his. Thursday dawned gold and crimson. Luke finished milking goats when dust swirled at the lane entrance. 3 vehicles this time. He wiped hands on a rag, heart hammering. When Cassidy stepped out, ball cap gone, hair catching sunlight, the truth of her stardom hit full force. Ty trailed, clipboard bristling with notes. Luke's gaze flicked to camera equipment, tension knotting his shoulders. Cassidy raised a peaceable hand. "Morning, Luke. I brought friends, but permission first." Ty introduced himself, summarizing back to the heartland. Cass Hart returns to rural roots, each episode reviving a family farm. "We put skin in the game repairs. Grand Sand share revenue," he said. The proposal felt surreal against the scent of goat hay. Luke asked for details. Ty produced documents. Line items generous yet fair. Molly emerged, face splitting with awe at the sight of Cassidy. The superstar knelt, greeting Molly by name without prompting, drawing immediate trust. Still, Luke hesitated. Cameras pry fame distorts. Cassidy stepped closer, voice low. I was that kid at the county fair. Your wife gave me extra preserves when I lost my ribbon. Music gave me everything, but I lost touch with good soil. Let me do right by the people who fed my dreams." Luke's throat tightened at Clara's memory invoked. He inhaled dusty barn air, closed his eyes, and pictured the foreclosure letter hidden in his desk. Dignity and survival collided in his chest. When he opened his eyes, determination surfaced. "One condition," he said. "You fix our farm, you fix our neighbors too. We do this together." Cassidy smiled, relief washing over features that earlier bore tension. "Deal," she said before Ty could object. Contracts were signed under the walnut tree. Molly climbed as a toddler, Ty emailing scanned copies to network lawyers. Luke felt the ground shift, not in danger, but like spring thaw welcoming seed. He half expected storm clouds to test him again, yet the sky held blue. Work began instantly. Devin the carpenter mapped roof repair. A soil scientist collected samples. The nutritionist measured molasses ratios for goat health, promising to sponsor feed. Luke watched a time-lapse camera mounted on the silo capture every hammer swing. Part of him feared waking to find it illusion, but the boards they replaced were real under his palms. That night, Luke and Cassidy sat on the porch, listening to katydids. Molly edited scholarship video inside using Ty's laptop. Cassidy teased Luke about his refusal of cash. He shrugged. "Can't put a price on neighbor duty." She nodded, strumming quiet chords. The melody of roadside grace began to form, the porch wood vibrating under ripe notes. Luke hummed a harmony, surprising himself and Cassidy. The camera inside Molly's phone, propped unseen on the sill to test time-lapse settings, captured the spontaneous duet. The clip would later melt hearts across continents. For now, it was only night air, two voices, and the miracle of a flat tire turned lifeline. Ty's crew arrived before sunrise every day that week, their box trucks clattering down the gravel lane at an hour when even roosters held their breaths. And with each dawn, Luke felt a jolt of disbelief that the promise on paper had translated into boots on his porch and power tools growling inside the barn. The production team worked like a colony of well-drilled ants, spreading across the property in bright-colored work vests. Unspooling extension cords that gleamed orange against morning dew, setting up remote cameras on fence posts, and lifting drone gear from foam cases with surgical care. And Luke could not help contrasting their polished efficiency with his own stopgap routines of baling twine repairs and second-hand wrenches. Devin, the red-bearded carpenter, directed a carpentry subgroup whose first act was to prop steel one beams beneath the sagging center beam so that each blow of a sledgehammer overhead sent a metallic ring, not the dreaded splintering wail Luke had endured for years whenever wind coaxed the barn to groan. Every nail driven felt to him like an overdue apology to Clara, and he caught himself murmuring thanks under his breath each time a new board slid into place with a satisfying thunk. Cameras captured all of it, but Ty made certain his crew remained respectful, reminding them they were guests whose greatest duty was to vanish behind their lenses. He wore a headset connected to the sound cart parked under a willow, occasionally whispering notes about ambient tractor noise or goat bleats that might serve as audio transitions, and though Luke had no idea what that crow meant, he appreciated the hush that settled whenever Molly stepped into frame. Ty's chief cinematographer, a soft-spoken woman named Dara, seemed fascinated by Molly's silent competence. She would track backwards in a crouch while Molly cradled a newborn kid, lens glimmering with the reflected sheen of goat eyes. And later, she would stash cash cards labeled Molly 1 and Molly 2 into a pelican case, as if the files themselves were fragile seedlings. Luke watched those interactions with a mix of pride and trepidation, because every recorded smile felt like a document he needed to protect from the internet's cynicism. The farm quickly transformed into a hive of multiplex activity. A soil scientist named Dr. Patel, her ponytail swinging like a pendulum every time she scooped samples, charted the nitrogen deficiency along the southern slope, reading numbers on a handheld spectrometer that looked too futuristic for red clay. She explained to Luke that a cover crop rotation of crimson clover, followed by winter rye, would replenish microbiota better than any store-bought fertilizer, and she promised seed donations from a University P. outreach program. Luke listened, mind-mapping the rotation schedule, and realized that for the first time in seasons, he would be planning improvements rather than postponing them. Yet as new lumber scented the breeze with pine sap, and the old Ford's engine started on the first crank thanks to a donated battery, trouble brewed along fence rows where gossip flowed faster than the creek. Wayne Hatcher's orchard, now partially under the production umbrella after Cassidy's impassioned phone call, welcomed a small camera crew that filmed Wayne pruning blighted limbs, but some neighbors outside the project footprint fell left behind. At the co-op, Luke overheard mutters that the Barrett farm had hitched itself to celebrity charity and would soon sell out to tourists. One afternoon, Mrs. Caldwell, whose hayfield bordered Luke's East Ridge, confronted him at the feed bin, questioning if drone flights violated her livestock privacy, a phrase that sounded absurd until Luke glimpsed genuine concern in her eyes, realizing she feared increased property taxes if the documentary glamorized acreage for short-term rentals. Luke explained the compact he and Cassidy had drafted, especially the clause requiring a community council to approve any tourism initiative, but Mrs. Caldwell crossed her arms, saying too many shows claimed to honor small towns before leading them, changed in ways that cost locals more than they gained. Luke could not dismiss her, because he too carried that fear like a pebble in his boot. That night, after the crew retired to Cedar Pines for showers and production calls, Luke brewed chicory coffee stronger than sensible and sat at the old pine table with Molly and Cassidy to discuss next steps. Cassandra, hair damp from washing camera dust away, looked younger than her stage persona as she sipped from a chipped enamel mug. She listened while Molly proposed inviting skeptical neighbors to a workday, not a filming day, emphasizing that free labor would not be requested, only free conversation. Cassidy nodded, her eyes bright with the same defiance that powered her psalm-writing, and she suggested layering a potluck into the gathering because food breached walls quicker than policy sheets. Luke worried about cost of extra plates, but Cassidy grinned, saying she would bring her mother's peach cobbler recipe and the ingredients herself. Those peaches can cost me a gold record for all I care. The potluck unfolded beneath generous September sunlight, warm but not suffocating. Folding tables appeared from church basements, covered with vinyl cloths patterned in checkers and faded florals. Aluminium pans steamed with macaroni and pulled pork. Children chased each other between parked pickups, while goats watched with mild disdain. Dara filmed background B-roll, then stowed her camera when Luke signaled that some neighbors preferred off-lens chats. Dr. Patel and Wayne demonstrated grafting cuts on a young apple tree. Mrs. Caldwell tasted Cassidy's cobbler and grudgingly admitted the crust rivaled her own grandmother's, and by dusk, the friction had softened into uneasy but genuine fellowship. Luke overheard Ty promising to blur property lines during editorial privacy would be preserved unless families opted in. Molly used the same evening to record her scholarship video essay against the golden backdrop of Orchard Rose. She spoke from the heart about resilience in rural medicine, about goat husbandry teaching empathy, about how every creature deserved a caretaker who understood both anatomy and the language of fear that animals spoke, through breath and stance. Dara operated the camera with tears marking tracks through dust on her cheeks, and Luke, standing behind the lens out of frame, marveled at his daughter's poise. The moment the take ended, a text buzzed on Ty's phone from the network. Early audience metrics on teaser footage predicted a breakout hit. Ty raised both fists silently, respecting the scene's reverence. The first cut of the documentary arrived a week later on a rugged hard drive couriered by overnight freight. Ty assembled crew and family in the cleared barn, which now boasted fresh siding painted honey gold. Luke's stomach fluttered like a trapped bat. Devin hung a sheet, Dara calibrated a projector, and at sunset the film began to roll. The opening shot swooped above parched fields, a drone glide slowed to 30% speed, while Cassidy's voice over a stripped acoustic riff whispered, "Some roads find you even when you forget the way home." Luke saw his farm from angles he never could have climbed, rows looking orderly despite drought scars, and felt simultaneously proud and exposed. The film wove a tapestry that surprised him. Clara's framed photographs lingered in soft focus, while Luke narrated the history of the land, Molly's laughter danced over goat bleats. Dr. Patel explained soil science using metaphors about soup stock that made everyone chuckle. Cassidy strummed snippets of roadside grace, the melody tugging like nostalgia for an era still unfolding. The half-hour cut ended with the potluck, wide shots of neighbors passing plates, and Luke's voice saying, "We rise together, or not at all." Silence hum until the credits faded, then applause erupted, echoing off new rafters like rainfall on tin. Luke exhaled, shoulders slumping in release. Ty promised network notes would be minor, then slipped outside to call executives giddy with validation. But the serenity proved fragile. 3 days after the screening, where their maps flashed warnings, tropical remnant Isaac, having broken apart over Louisiana, aimed its ragged core straight toward central Tennessee, predicted to stall for Ballina. 48 hours. Luke's drought-cracked fields needed moisture, but forecasts hinted at 10 inches in 2 days, far more than thirsty soil could absorb. Memories of previous floods swamped his mine corn drowned, fences swept away, insurance adjusters sighing. The crew raced to elevate electrical gear in the barn loft, sandbag the equipment trailer, and secure livestock shelters. Luke and Devin hammered cross braces onto the new hayloft door, even as first outer band squalls peppered the roof with staccato. Rain arrived in layered curtains, each stronger than the last. Water sheeted off hill slopes, converging in gullies, and overnight the newly dug irrigation ditch overflowed, pushing muddy torrents across the driveway. Luke, soaked to the bone, waded thigh-deep to clear debris from the culvert, but the flow only hissed louder, lifting gravel. Cassidy, refusing Ty's suggestion to ride out the storm in town, helped Molly corral Getz onto pallets inside the workshop. At one point, lightning forked across the southern field, and the brilliant flare revealed an alarming surge pooling around the propane tank. Luke's chest clenched. If water displaced the tank, a leak could ignite. He and Devin lashed ropes around the cylinder and anchored it to a cedar trunk, muscles burning as wind whipped horizontal rain. Inside the farmhouse, designated as temporary command center, Ty monitored county emergency alerts. A message flashed that the upstream dam on Pine Ridge Lake had opened floodgates to relieve pressure. Downstream creeks would rise quickly. Luke calculated the route. Barrack Creek, normally a lazy trickle gurgling behind the barn, would swell first, then crest by dawn. He gathered everyone in the living room to form a safety plan. Camera operators packed essential gear in waterproof Pelican cases. Dr. Patel used a livestock stethoscope as a prop to keep children occupied with heartbeat science. Cassidy tuned her acoustic guitar quietly, fingers moving almost automatically, as if music grounded her nerves. She caught Luke's worried glance and offered a faint smile, mouthing, "We got this." But at 3 a.m., a deep rumble shook the floorboards. Molly, dozing in an armchair, jolted awake as glass rattled. Devin opened the front door and cursed. A swirl of muddy water funneled across the yard, carrying straw bales and a wheelbarrow past the porch steps. Luke's heart hammered as he realized the creek had jumped banks sooner than modeled. They raced to the barn, water now calf-deep in the paddock, and found goats bleeding on the pallets, safe, but terrified. Luke led animals higher onto the hay trailer, lashing them loosely for security. Cassidy, shoes sucking mud, hauled feed buckets overhead to keep them from floating. Ty's crew captured footage because they could not ignore the drama, but Luke barely registered cameras, focused on securing lives. A section of the new barn wall bowed under pressure. Devin braced it with a salvaged telephone pole, driving screws through oak siding while waves lapped his knees. Dawn approached in a flicker of bruised purple sky, and rain moderated, but runoff kept rising. For 3 more hours, they hauled debris, reinforced sandbags, and diverted flow with pickaxes, until finally the creek peaked below the barn threshold. Exhaustion settled heavier than silt. They collapsed on hay bales, soaked, shivering, yet alive. When sun finally broke through tatters of cloud, light revealed a barn still standing, a farmhouse untouched, but fields streaked with erosion scars. Luke surveyed soybean rows. Some patches lay flattened under layer of silt, others tore clean away. Yet the old walnut tree by the house still waved leaves in soft breeze. And at its base, Molly's childhood tire swing bobbed like a stubborn survivor. Luke exhaled, part grief, part gratitude. Cassidy stepped beside him, mud coating her jeans. "It could have been worse," she said. "Always can," Luke answered, voice frayed. "But we still got a roof, animals, and each other," she said, gesturing toward crew lugging equipment back up the drive. "And we have footage that shows what resilience looks like." Luke chuckled without mirth. "Footage doesn't pay replant seed." She nudged him with her elbow. "Maybe not, but the network's disaster relief arm might. They like narrative arcs." Her grin turned mischievous. True to her word, Ty pitched a flood relief companion segment the next morning. Executives greenlit emergency budget, reasoning that showcasing real struggles enhanced authenticity. A relief fund launched within days. Viewers could donate via QR code once the episode aired. Luke felt conflicted letting strangers bankroll his recovery, but Dr. Patel reminded him that regenerative farming thrived on communal investment, not rugged isolation. He accepted the help, vowing to pay forward. While debris cleanup continued, Molly received an email. Her scholarship video advanced to finalist stage. She flung her arms around Cassidy in jubilant surprise. Luke raised her off the ground in a spinning hug. The flood shadow shrank slightly. October eased in with crisp mornings smelling of leaf mold, and cover crop seed from Dr. Patel's program arrived in burlap sacks stenciled with university logos. Volunteers from churches and local FFA chapters joined to sow clover across ravaged rows. Ty filmed drone shots of green sprigs, emerging where floodwater had scoured topsoil. The aerial contrast between fresh sprouts and bare earth created time-lapse gold. Luke drove the tractor towing the seed spreader, engine newly serviced by a mechanic team that offered labor at cost after seeing news of the flood online. Each pass of the field laid a stripe of potential, and Luke found his posture straightening unconsciously, shoulders remembering the rhythm of possibility. The documentary's second cut incorporated flood footage. Watching himself wade knee-deep while lightning spidered overhead made Luke cringe, but Ty assured him the sequence showed leadership, not desperation. Cassidy penned a new verse for Roadside Grace, referencing rivers that rise yet spare what hope rebuilds, and she recorded vocals in a mobile studio parked under the walnut, birds singing backup. Network marketing strategists scheduled a premiere for early December, aligning with holiday charity drives. Billboards in Nashville teased the show, a silhouette of Cassidy in denim, guitar slung across her back, a rust-colored barn silhouetted behind her, the tagline "Back to the Heartland, real country, real courage." Luke saw one on a feed store errand and felt a mix of awe and apprehension. In Barrett County, some folks teased him about celebrity heirs, but more stopped to shake his hand, moved by newspaper features portraying him as the farmer who never sends a bill. Thanksgiving week molted into a flurry of last-minute edits, closed caption transcripts, and sponsorship tie-ins. A boot company pledged a percentage of Black Friday sales to the relief fund. A seed distributor offered matching donations. Luke wrestled with the ethics of corporate branding on his narrative, but Molly argued that if big businesses wanted to finance small farms, they should be allowed to do so, provided transparency remained ironclad. He conceded, trusting her sharper instincts about modern media. On premiere night, Cedar Pines rented out its lounge for crew and neighbors who could not gather at the farm. Luke set up a large screen in the barn again, this time adding borrowed patio heaters humming like oversized bees among bales. Cassidy invited her band, now prepping for a short winter charity tour, and they performed unplugged while guests arrived, lanterns glowing among rafters. Mrs. Caldwell and Wayne Hatcher sat together on a refurbished bench, passing a thermos of spiced cider. Dr. Patel arrived with roasted chickpeas, seasoned with cumin, and stories about microbial symbiosis that drew children into a semicircle. At 7 on the dot, Ty dimmed the lights. The network's splash logo shimmered, and Back to the Heartland Episode 1 filled the sheet. Luke's pulse hammered his ears. The pacing felt perfect. Roadside flat tire, barn rebuild, potluck, storm, flood resilience, all interwoven with Cassidy's quiet confessions about lost purpose and found roots. Donations links popped at tasteful intervals. When Luke's line about neighbors rising together rolled, a cheer erupted. The episode closed on Molly, releasing a rehabilitated barn owl, wings unfurling against a pink sky, while Cassidy's chorus soared a moment Dara had captured on a whim one dawn. Credits scrolled, listing every volunteer. Luke saw Clara Barrett, memorialized at the very end, as inspiration forever, and felt tears he had suppressed for months finally spill into his beard. Phones buzzed instantly. Ty shouted metrics. Viewer counts spiking. Social feeds flooding with hashtag roadside grace and hashtag real country again. The relief fund page crashed under traffic. A good problem, tech support assured. Out by the heaters, Mrs. Caldwell hugged Luke fiercely, whispering apology for her earlier doubts. Wayne handed him a bag of Stamen apples, as thanks for lobbying the network to feature the orchard. Cassidy slipped away to call her mother, tearful words about redemption caught on the wind. When the barn emptied long after midnight, Luke and Molly sat on the cleaned hayloft floor, legs dangling above feed sacks stacked neatly thanks to new shelving. They shared leftover cobbler straight from the pan, and Molly confessed her fear that scholarships judged by algorithms might still overlook her despite the documentary glow. Luke told her algorithms could count clicks but not character, and any institution valuing rural resilience would see hers blazing bright. Molly smiled, wiping cinnamon from her lip, and laid her head on his shoulder. Cassidy climbed the ladder quietly, guitar slung over one shoulder. "Got room for one more slice?" she asked, voice husky from a night of autograph signing. Luke gestured to the pan. She sat across, legs folded, and tested chords. In the hush of deep night, she played the unreleased final version of Roadside Grace, now arranged with a string quartet sample Ty had layered subtly under her acoustic. Luke closed his eyes, letting melody wash away fatigue, each note a thread sewing together weeks of chaos into a quilted memory he might keep forever. December mornings turned frost-sharp. The cover crops sprouted a vivid green hush across the fields, looking like velvet draped over old wounds. Luke walked the rows daily, boots squeaking on crusted dew, grateful for signs of soil healing. He began drafting a 5-year plan, something he had not dared since Clara's diagnosis. Diversify into apiary. Again, trial heritage tomatoes under hoop houses, convert the far pasture into fa. Rotational grazing for grass-fed beef. The network's second season option seemed likely, but Luke insisted on sustainability independent of cameras. Cassidy nodded, promising her involvement would always be additive, never essential. One quiet evening near Christmas, a letter arrived with the State University crest. Molly hesitated before opening, breath hitching. She read silently, eyes widening, then shrieked. Full tuition scholarship, beginning fall term, plus a summer internship at the veterinary field lab. Luke lifted her and spun until both laughed breathless. Cassidy filmed the moment on her phone, then slipped away, not wanting to intrude, but Luke beckoned her back, wrapping one arm around Molly, the other around Cassidy. The three of them stood in the kitchen where sunflower curtains still clung to the rod, and for the first time Luke felt fully certain the farmhouse would witness another generation's laughter. Christmas Day dawned crystal clear. Luke rose early, as always, but found Cassidy already outside, coffee mug steaming in gloved hands, gazing at the barn now crowned by a painted sign that read, "Share the road, share the load," a phrase Devon had stenciled as a surprise. Together they walked to the ridge where frost-coated weeds glittered under pale sun. Cassidy confessed she had agreed to a limited spring tour, proceeds to feed the Heartland Fund. She asked Luke if he might join one Nashville show to speak about resilience. He chuckled, picturing stage lights. Then he remembered Molly's essay, the scholarship board, the flood, and how each step into visibility had fed tangible change, not ego. He agreed, on condition he could wear his worn leather boots and skip the teleprompter. She promised, shaking his hand. As they returned downhill, they crossed tire ruts, nearly erased by winter, grass-faint echoes of the blown-out SUV incident. Luke paused, towing the indentation. "Funny how everything starts small," he said, "like a flat tire or a spoonful of preserves." Cassidy pulled her scarf tighter, following his gaze. Or a song idea scribbled on a diner napkin, she added. For a moment they stood silently, acknowledging the power of smallest acts. Supper that evening gathered neighbors and crew who now felt like extended family. The farmhouse table groaned under smoked ham, candied yams, and Dr. Patel's homemade naan, which amused and delighted elders in equal measure. Ty announced the relief fund topped $300,000. Cheers erupted. Molly proposed allocating part of the balance to create a micro-grant for high school ag clubs statewide. The idea was accepted unanimously. Cassidy led a carol sing-along that meandered into classic country. Luke, coaxed by Molly, sang harmony on Will the Circle Be Unbroken, his voice rough but steady, and the room hushed as the song wound to a close. Later, as embers glowed in the hearth, Cassidy handed Luke a wrapped parcel, a leather-bound ledger with embossed title, Barrett Farm, New Seasons. Inside, the first page read, Balance forward, gratitude. Luke traced the words, his throat too tight for thanks. Cassidy touched his shoulder, understanding unspoken. After guests departed and the house settled into night noises, Luke stepped onto the porch and looked at the sky, a vault of pinprick stars sharper than any city billboard. He thought about Clara, felt her hand in the cold wind lifting his hair, and whispered, "We're okay, sweetheart. More than okay." From the barn came a soft bleat, as if the goats echoed amen. The porch boards creaked behind him. Molly appeared, wrapping a quilt around them both. They stood together, father and daughter, facing a future bright as the frost-glittering field, and somewhere down the dark highway, a driver maybe pulled over with hazard lights waiting for help. Luke knew if he passed by, he would still stop, wrench in hand, because generosity once set in motion rolls further than the longest back road. And far away, a psalm titled Roadside Grace climbed streaming charts, but here on the farm, it remained what it started as. A melody nodded to a moment of unbilled kindness, proof that the smallest turning of a lug nut can loosen the world from despair and let it spin toward hope. Snow lingered only on the north-facing slopes that first March, but the chill still gripped nightfall hard enough to form lacework ice across puddles before dawn. Luke Barrett learned to wake an hour earlier than years past, because spring no longer meant only planting and fence checks. There was now a puzzle of emails, grant charts, and meeting reminders sent by Ty's production coordinator, a whirlwind named Shay, who could juggle 6 Zoom calls from the passenger seat of a moving van. The farm's reinvention demanded both soil and signature, and Luke discovered that the muscle memory of honest labor could stretch into clerical stamina if hope supplied caffeine. The premiere of Back to the Heartland had been out for 3 months, and ripple effects still lapped against Barrett County like gentle waves that occasionally hit undertows. Donations had rebuilt Wayne Hatcher's orchard fences and funded Mrs. Caldwell's hay bale elevator, so her arthritic knees no longer protested every winter stacking. State officials, noticing the documentary's tourism draw, promised highway resurfacing funds for the winding road that carried viewers to the valley. Yet promises were politics, and asphalt arrived slower than camera crews, leaving cracks that could swallow a tire in spring thaw. Molly spent weekends on scholarship orientations via video, her face framed by dorm room posters she had pinned imaginatively to her bedroom wall in anticipation. At night she quizzed Luke on ruminant digestive cycles, a subject he knew intuitively, but had never memorized Latin for. Together they laughed at his attempt to pronounce reticulo omazelle, and in those moments Luke felt younger than drought had allowed in years. Cassidy Hart balanced a rehearsal schedule with intermittent Thompson Square Arena shows, whose proceeds channeled directly to the Heartland Fund. Her tour bus parked in the Barrett Drive one weekend a month, unplugged from the glamour machine, letting her rest her voice among quiet goats and Dr. Patel's clover plots, now thick with bees from Luke's new hives. Early one Saturday, she confessed to Luke that national executives pressed for a duet with a pop country influencer whose brand smelled more of perfume than pasture. "My manager says crossover sells," she said, toying with a guitar pick. But the lyrics mention luxury trucks more than loyalty. Luke chuckled. "Songs, Ought to taste like dirt under fingernails, not chrome polish. She smirked, scribbled that line in her notebook, and decided to table the duet. While Luke appreciated the documentary's blessings, he also sensed a faint tension creeping in at the edges. Production schedules occasionally clashed with the slower rhythm of Seedling's camera-ready daylight, did not always match dew point windows ideal for seeding. Ty managed conflicts diplomatically, but Luke caught himself grumbling when a second unit drone hovered longer than necessary over the calving pasture. More than once he had to remind crew members to latch gates after collecting B-roll of Molly's goats. Trust remained sturdy, though it creaked under strain. The show's success inspired copycats. A rival media company announced a series titled Rural Revival that promised glossier graphics and celebrity hosts who wore designer boots pre-scuffed by stylists. Their pilot targeted a farm 2 counties east, offering incentives rumored to dwarf Cassidy's budget. Luke heard through Marvin Pike that Rural Revival planned an agri concert featuring a pop country lineup with pyrotechnics on a hay wagon. Sounds like fireworks near tinder dry fields, Luke muttered. Cassidy's eyebrows arched at the news. Authenticity can't be outbid, she assured, though worry flickered behind her even tones. Late March delivered a fresh threat, one storms had not carved, but insects. Warm winter and wet soil hatched an early brood of Japanese beetles that targeted Dr. Patel's clover, skeletonizing leaves. The demonstration fields risked losing the very biomass meant to rejuvenate the soil. Dr. Patel ordered parasitic nematodes, but shipping delays loomed. Luke could not sit idle. Remembering his grandfather's tales, he improvised beetle traps using milk jugs baited with mashed bananas and yeast, suspending them on bamboo stakes scattered among rows. Cassidy joined, joking their farm now smelled like a produce stall past closing. 2 days later, the jugs filled with writhing beetles, reducing pressure until nematodes arrived. Dara captured the sequence, editing it later into a montage underscored by a playful fiddle riff. Viewers would post DIY trap tutorials within hours of broadcast. April ushered the county council's long-promised debate over tourism zoning. The plan proposed a seasonal festival on Barrett Road, highlighting regenerative farming, with guided tours, craft booths, and nightly bluegrass sets in the orchard. Luke attended the courthouse hearing, suit jacket borrowed from Pastor Jim. Supporters packed half the pews, while skeptics worried about traffic. Mrs. Caldwell, now a convert, testified how volunteers built her new barn ramp. Her voice trembled as she urged approval. Luke followed, speaking quietly about the need for diversified income streams that did not rely on commodity speculation. He explained that festival profits would flow into a cooperative trust for microloans, an idea Molly had drafted for her scholarship essay extension. The motion passed 4-1, contingent on road improvements and strict sound curfews. Luke felt triumph, tempered by responsibility. Planning the inaugural Heartland Harvest Festival consumed May. Shay created color-coded spreadsheets assigning tasks. Luke oversaw crop tour logistics. Wayne curated orchard tastings. Cassidy booked musical acts favoring local talent. A team of architectural students volunteered to design composting toilet units shaped like miniature silos, determined to showcase sustainability flair. Dr. Patel contributed an educational worm farm display. Ty, mindful of narrative clarity, negotiated filming windows that would not intrude on guests. Amid preparations, Luke received a certified letter stamped with the seal of a corporate agribusiness conglomerate named Greenrise Foods, the same group rumored to court Rural Revival. The letter praised his documentary presence and offered a buyout option for 50 acres, promising investment in high-tech greenhouse pods to create year-round produce under LED arrays. They dangled a figure high enough to erase debts for neighboring farms as well. Molly compared it to selling soil memories for sterilized hydroponic towers. Luke pondered the benefit of guaranteed income against the sacrifice of acreage he and Clara once planted in pumpkins every October. He scheduled a meeting nonetheless, believing due diligence owed to his neighbor's welfare. The Greenrise representative, a 30-something executive in an immaculate blazer, arrived driving an electric SUV whose tires sprayed gravel like confetti across Luke's mailbox. They toured the soybean field while the rep sketched profit graphs on a tablet. Luke asked about local jobs. The rep spoke of automation, remote monitoring, minimal labor. Luke felt a chill deeper than the morning breeze. When he mentioned the documentary's community ethos, the rep smiled thinly and suggested authenticity could be rebranded with logos. That evening, Luke burned the company's glossy brochure in his wood stove, flames consuming artist renderings of greenhouse pods, glowing neon blue against a night sky. June exploded in green. Clover stood knee-high, bees droned happily, and Molly left for a pre-college veterinary camp funded by her scholarship award. Luke drove her to the university town, his heart swell and ache mixing as strongly as the coffee in his travel mug. Her dorm smelled of fresh paint and possibility. He fixed her bookshelf, left her with a jar of Clara's last strawberry jam, and hugged her twice before retreating. The drive home felt longer without her chatter, but the farm greeted him with chores stacked like cordwood, which dulled loneliness. Cassidy texted a photo of fans holding roadside Grace lyric posters, captioned, "Molly's already got a fan club here." Luke smiled, but the kitchen felt too quiet. Festival week approached with summer heat shimmering above fields. Temporary fencing erected to guide visitor foot traffic looked like silver lace over emerald hills. Wayne's orchard hung heavy with fruit timed to ripen for the event due to a clever micro-irrigation schedule Dr. Patel designed. Volunteers strung Edison bulbs between cedar posts, transforming the space into an open-air ballroom. Cassidy's crew parked tour buses behind the barn, yet she insisted on sleeping in the farmhouse spare room, claiming bus bunks felt like coffins. 2 nights before gates opened, thunderheads mushroomed on the western horizon. Local weather predicted a severe storm but bypassed Barrack County by 50 miles. Still, Luke secured tent stakes and stowed vendor crates inside. At midnight, wind moaned unexpectedly, rattling loose tarps. Lightning arced, and rain slapped in sideways sheets. Luke dashed outside to tighten ropes, only to see a rogue gust ripping a row of light poles from their moorings. One pole cracked, dominoing others, sending strands of bulbs down like sizzling vines. Sparks hissed among wet grass. Luke shouted for Cassidy, Devin, and Shay. They labored beneath driving rain, hearts pounding against wind roar, salvaging what they could until the squall moved east an hour later. Morning revealed carnage, toppled stages, waterlogged electrical junctions, and fruit scattered where orchard nets tore. Molly, video calling during breakfast, gasped at the damage. Luke swallowed despair, knowing the festival start could not be pushed back because marketing and permits were locked. Cassidy rallied crews, quoting chorus lines about dusting off boots. Volunteers poured in with tool belts and portable generators. Dr. Patel's students laid straw to soak puddles. Devin's carpenters re-erected trusses with hurricane brackets. Dara filmed a time-lapse of the rebuild that later became the episode opener for Season 2, set to a fiddle-banjo instrumental Cassidy whipped up right there on site. Festival day dawned clear, humidity low, as if nature had signed a peace treaty. Cars queued at the newly graveled county road, asphalt patching unfinished but functional. Luke, wearing a clean denim shirt Molly had ironed during spring break, greeted early birds with a handshake and a map of walking paths. Bread vendors sold sourdough rounds shaped like tractor wheels, while Dr. Patel guided kids through a microbiome maze built from straw bales. Cassidy's midday set attracted locals and out-of-towners lured by social media hype. When she invited Luke on stage for Roadside Grace, the crowd hushed, then sang the chorus back to them, thousands of voices echoing across valleys. Luke's throat pinched with emotion, but the notes steadied as he remembered Molly's faith in authenticity. Greenrise representatives attended, eyeing foot traffic. Luke greeted them politely but offered no tour. Instead, he introduced them to Dr. Patel, who passionately narrated organic carbon metrics. The reps nodded politely, yet their expressions stiffened. Photovoltaic greenhouses did not deliver such stories. The evening closed with a lantern release, memorializing local farmers lost in recent years. Names floated skyward, each paper vessel carrying a tea-light star. Luke lit Clara's lantern, watching it ascend until it merged with constellations. Cassidy quietly placed her arm around his shoulders. Festival revenues surpassed expectations, covering next year's planning costs and seeding the micro-loan cooperative. Newspapers ran headlines. Heartland Harvest Festival proves rural renaissance possible without corporate buyouts. Greenrise withdrew its offer within a week. Liberty Ridge, the farm 2 counties east under rural revival, suffered a setback when staged fireworks ignited a pasture, causing public backlash. Luke privately sympathized with that farmer, sending him a personal letter offering advice on community engagement. Summer tapered to late August haze. Molly returned from camp, bursting with case study anecdotes, the dorm experience having seasoned her independence. She brought home a rescue dog, a shaggy mutt named Tractor, whose tail spun like a windmill whenever goats approached. Luke pretended annoyance, but built Tractor a cedar doghouse in 2 evenings. Back to the heartland, Season 2 cameras rolled again, focusing on orchard harvest innovations and Luke's new apiary. Honey flow streamed amber into jars labeled Barrett Grace, an accidental pun Ty suggested might catch. Pre-orders flooded the online store set up by Shay, forcing Luke to hire 2 part-time neighbors for packaging. The income allowed him to consider replacing the failing Southfield irrigation pivot. Yet looming beyond the cheerful bustle was the intangible question of sustainability without cameras. Ty gathered Luke, Cassidy, and core crew for a campfire meeting, acknowledging network contracts seldom last forever. They brainstormed exit strategies, a non-profit foundation transferring show profits into rotating grants educational workshops to keep visitors engaged after filming ends robust local IS. Leadership beyond Luke's family. Molly proposed a digital curriculum bridging urban schools with real farm data, and Dara volunteered to film modular lessons. Plans took shape like scaffold emerging around an unseen structure, giving Luke comfort that the story would outlive primetime slots. October leaves blazed red when Luke received a manila envelope from the governor's office. He unfolded a letter inviting him to speak at the State Agriculture Forum on regenerative practice. Cassidy whooped, insisting on coaching him through teleprompter phobia. Luke practiced in the empty barn, stumbling over words like rhizosphere, until Molly coached, "Pretend you're explaining to goats." He laughed and tried again, this time smoother, picturing Clara leaning on a gate with patient eyes. At the forum in Nashville, Luke stepped to the lectern wearing his best denim and new boots, gifted by the county FFA. Reporters flashed cameras, but he fixed his gaze on a row of young ag students, recalling Molly's dreams. He spoke about soil as a living ledger, kindness as capital that compounds, and how a flat tire fixed for free turned into a movement no policy alone could spark. When he finished, applause rose from legislative aides to lobbyists, even hardened skeptics dabbed eyes. The testimonial helped pass a bill allocating funds for regenerative pilot farms statewide. Back home, Luke found Cassidy on the porch, strumming a wistfully sweet melody. She confessed she was writing an acoustic record stripped of studio polish, its heartbeat the hum of Barrett bees. She asked if she could record ambient farm sounds for rhythmic texture, and Luke laughed, offering the barn at midnight when the wind sang through gaps. November rains returned, but with moderation, filling ponds without flooding. Luke checked beehive stores, installed mouse guards, and sealed cracks in the tractor shed. He paused often to gaze at clover now decomposing into dark humus, a promise of next spring's fertility. On Thanksgiving morning, Molly woke early to mix Clara's cornbread dressing, humming Roadside Grace under her breath. Luke set the table with sunflower cloth renewed by Molly's careful stitching. Cassidy arrived carrying a pumpkin pie sweetened with Barrett honey, still warm. Ty and Dara joined later, bringing a framed aerial photograph taken that first autumn after the flood, newly signed by every volunteer who helped rebuild. Luke hung it beside the sepia photo of his grandparents feeding chickens. The timeline of resilience stretched across one wall. After dinner they gathered on the porch, mugs of apple cider steam wafting into cold air. Tractor curled at Luke's feet, goats bleated in sleepy chorus. Cassidy produced her guitar, fingers coaxing a tune unresolved. She invited Luke to supply the finishing line. He considered, then sang softly, "When good hearts meet on broken roads, tomorrow learns to breathe." Cassidy's eyes glistened. "That's the title," she whispered, nodding. Distant traffic on the newly paved road hummed steady, carrying tourists who would spend money at Wayne's orchard stand, now open year-round. A billboard featuring Molly in veterinary smock promoted county scholarships funded by the festival's surplus. Everywhere Luke looked, proof flickered that seeds of generosity had sprouted into forests. Still, he kept his grandpa's lug wrench in the truck bed, freshly oiled. Because somewhere, someday, another driver would blow a tire on a lonely stretch, and the lesson Luke carried deepest was that the simplest gesture could upend despair's empire. Cameras might follow or not, psalms might chart or fade, but kindness, once given wheels, travels impossible miles. As stars chilled overhead, Luke lifted his mug in a quiet toast. To Clara gone, to Molly rising, to Cassidy wandering back roads with pockets full of cords, to soil organisms feasting unseen. The future pulsed like distant lightning, potent yet not menacing, and Luke felt ready to receive it, whatever shape arrived. End of Part 3. Part 4 will complete the 20,000 word target, carrying the narrative into winter's close, Molly's first semester, the long-term ripple effects on Barrett County, and a final full-circle moment that seals Luke's legacy while launching the Heartland Initiative far beyond Tennessee. No loops, fresh scenes only coming next. Winter came slow that year, as if respectful of fields still catching their breath after the festival rush, and though a thin ice sheet occasionally glazed the pond at dawn, most days balmy breezes drifted over Barrett County, carrying a scent of smoldered oak from wood stoves starting early. Luke enjoyed the gentler cold. It let him finish post-harvest tasks without battling sleet, but it also meant cover crops remained greener, luring deer that nibbled at clover crowns. He installed motion sensor lights fashioned from discarded security fixtures. Ty's gaffer had replaced with LEDs, an innovation Luke wired himself after watching 3 online tutorials with tractor snoring. Nearby, the beams whooshed on whenever a curious doe poked through the fence, and Luke smiled each time the lights proved a silent shepherd. December's first week delivered Molly's final semester grades via email, all A's and a note from her physiology professor recommending she apply for an undergraduate research fellowship. Luke read the message twice, pride overwhelming his usual economy of words. That night he coaxed Tractor into an impromptu celebratory dance around the kitchen island, bumping into chairs while Molly laughed so hard tears blurred her freckles. Cassidy, on a 2-day break from studio sessions in Nashville, captured the moment on her phone, tucking it in her inspiration folder labeled Joy Unfiltered. The Heartland Fun Board held its inaugural meeting the following weekend, converting the farmhouse living room into a war room of sticky notes and laptop screens. Representatives from 3 other states joined remotely, faces glowing inside digital boxes hovering beside the sunflower curtains Clara once sewed. Dr. Patel chaired the session, describing soil health metrics as financial statements of the earth, and proposed a revolving microloan program for tool-sharing co-ops. Wayne Hatcher presented data on how drip irrigation funded by the show had increased orchard yield by 15%, then shyly admitted he wanted to repay part of his grant early. The board voted to recycle Wayne's repayment into a starter fund for Liberty Ridge, the farm damaged by fireworks in the rival show, thus turning previous rivalry into solidarity. Luke listened, occasionally adding a practical note about vendor contacts. His earlier reluctance eased by seeing paperwork translate to real roofs and real feed bins in neighboring counties. Back to the Heartland's second season premiere, aired 2 days before Christmas. This episode opened not with drone vistas, but with Luke guiding a calf's birth under spring thunder, his steady hands coated in amniotic fluid, while distant lightning silhouetted the barn. Viewers later flooded comment feeds praising the rawness. Some city fans wrote they never realized how quietly a farmer speaks to frightened livestock. The cut then followed Molly at university, dissecting goat hooves for a parody study, her lab partner admitting she had never touched a live animal before vet school. Ratings eclipsed the first season, surprising network brass, who had expected a sophomore slump. Ty texted Luke a row of firework emojis, and the phrase, "lightning struck twice." Luke stored the news gently, aware success can breed complacency. Instead, he spent the week repairing a chain-link section along the creek, reflecting on how that creek once threatened to wash away everything. The water now trickled politely, its banks reinforced with willow stakes planted under Dr. Patel's direction. Holding a post driver, Luke understood that every improvement had grown from a seed he never intended, the instinctive choice to stop for a flat tire, and he felt gratitude settle, like warm cedar shavings in his grade chest. Cassidy rang in the new year by live-streaming an acoustic concert from the barn's hayloft, lanterns strung behind her glowing like constellations. She opened with Roadside Grace, but midway, she debuted the duet they had co-written at Thanksgiving, titled Tomorrow Learns to Breathe. Luke, off camera, strung simple chords on the Martin guitar Cassidy insisted he borrow, his calloused fingers adapting quickly. Over 50,000 viewers tuned in. Donations for rural broadband access spiked, a cause Molly championed after classmates complained of slow farm internet during her video call demonstrations. By mid-January, Molly was back on campus, Tractor sulking in her absence, until Luke took the dog on extended fence runs. Cassidy shuttled between Nashville and the farm, finishing her stripped-down record using ambient barn reverb as a natural echo chamber. One chilly afternoon she positioned microphones beside hive boxes to capture bee hums for a track called Honey in Winter. Luke teased that city listeners might swat imaginary insects when the song played. She laughed, adjusting gain levels. The state agriculture bill Luke testified for earlier materialized into grants, and Barrett Farm received a modest stipend, earmarked for a rotational grazing trial. Luke used the funds to purchase 3 belted Galloway heifers, hardy cattle known for efficient grass conversion. He partnered with Mrs. Caldwell, whose hayfield bordered his own, crafting a shared paddock agreement the documentary team highlighted as a template for neighbor collaboration. Dar's lens lingered on calf whiskers frosted with morning dew, a silent argument that true abundance arises from cooperative systems, not fences. February delivered an unexpected invitation. The American Sustainable Farm Symposium in Seattle requested a keynote from Luke and Dr. Patel. Luke nearly declined public speaking. Still knotted his stomach, but Molly urged him via late-night text, reminding him goats once terrified her until she learned their language. Cassidy offered to cover travel costs, tie-arranged media training, and soon Luke found himself on a plane, marveling at snow-peaked Rockies slicing cloud layers beneath him. At the symposium he described integrating regenerative theory with storytelling, while Dr. Patel presented data spikes correlating viewer donations to soil health improvements. Their lecture ended in a standing ovation. Afterwards, a group of Pacific Northwest farmers cornered Luke, asking advice on clover mixes, proof that knowledge migrates faster than insects when carried by earnest voices. Back home, March dawned with a phone call that tested Luke's newfound calm. Greenrise Foods, having watched the festival's success and the show's ratings leap, reapproached with a revised proposal. They would purchase only 10 acres to build a demonstration greenhouse powered by biogas from farm manure, pledging internships for local students and profit sharing with the Heartland Fund. The offer arrived with a personal note from the CEO praising Luke's symposium speech. Luke hesitated. The plan seemed less invasive, potentially beneficial. Yet he sensed Greenrise aimed to attach its brand to authenticity rather than cultivate it. He convened the Heartland board in the barn, inviting Greenrise executives to present. Cassidy, just back from a charity gig in Austin, attended via video. The CEO outlined a sleek slideshow of LED-lit tubers, sensor-controlled irrigation, charts predicting 4 crop cycles per year. Dr. Patel asked about energy audits. The CEO deflected. Molly, joining remotely between lectures, queried student wages. The VP promised competitive stipends. Luke listened, tapping his wrench against a boot for cadence. When the rep concluded, Luke asked a single question. Can you guarantee this greenhouse never outsources labor abroad? The rep stumbled, citing supply chain flexibility. Luke closed his notebook. In private discussion, Luke voiced concern that even a small corporate wedge might redirect cultural emphasis from soil to screens. The board agreed to decline but proposed a partnership on research sharing. Greenrise could test LED horticulture elsewhere, while Barrett Farm provided soil-based data for open publication. No bray. Exclusivity. Greenrise withdrew again. Luke expected backlash. but Cassidy's PR team released a statement framing the decision as a victory for community-led development. Social media applauded, and the story trended under #SoilBeforeSilicon. Spring equinox arrived with Molly's return for break, her hair shorter, confidence taller. She carried a folder of fellowship acceptance letters, yet she spoke mostly about her new mentor, Dr. Lou, who specialized in large animal anesthesia. Luke, frying bacon while she regaled Cassidy with campus tales, felt both pride and bittersweet nostalgia. The girl who once laced goat horns with ribbons now discussed isoflurane dosages. Filming for the final episode of Season 2 coincided with lambing. One ewe struggled, breech-positioned, and Luke guided Molly through repositioning while cameras rolled discreetly behind hay bales. The lamb emerged alive, bawling at first breath, and Molly's decisive calm radiated across the crew. Dara later told Ty, the shot captured transition knowledge, passing seamlessly from parent to child. A perfect season finale image. Editing concluded in late April, and Ty invited Luke and Cassidy to review. They gathered in the makeshift studio Dana had set up in the orchard shed. The final montage showed Luke at the symposium, Molly delivering a baby goat, and Cassidy mixing barn echo tracks, intercut with neighbors repairing the storm-damaged light poles the past stitched visibly to the future. When credits rolled, the screen faded into a dedication for Clara, who taught us that preserves and preservation share the same root. Luke's eyes stung as he remembered Clara's steady smile while trimming sunflower curtains so many years ago. The network extended a 3-season option, but Ty proposed a change, transitioning Luke and Barrett Farm from primary subject to advisory hub, each new season following a different region while Luke camoed to offer guidance, ensuring the narrative's credibility grew. Luke agreed on one condition. Every featured farm would receive mentorship from a local agronomist like Dr. Patel, not imported experts. The network conceded. Summer brought Barrett Farm's first honey harvest from the new hives. Golden lids embossed with the barn silhouette sold out online within hours, some jars shipping to Norway, where a viewer binge watched the show to practice English. The micro-loan cooperative funded a startup apiary there in return, forging unexpected cross-continental kinship. Luke chuckled reading an email from the Norwegian farmer praising Tennessee bees as ambassadors of sweetness. Molly embarked on her fellowship, leaving Tractor to guard Luke and Cassidy while they prepared the property for another festival. Yet, Luke sensed the land needed a quieter autumn, so they scaled the event to a harvest picnic for donors and volunteers instead of an open-ticket gala. The choice affirmed their commitment to slow growth. Guests spent afternoons walking pasture with Dr. Patel, tasting honey, and swapping seed stories under a canvas shade. Ty filmed, but promised not to broadcast beyond a short social clip. Sometimes moments were for the people present, nothing more. One crisp September morning, a rental sedan edged down the drive, its fuel-efficient hum unfamiliar among diesel pickups. A middle-aged woman stepped out wearing a raincoat despite clear skies, her hands trembling slightly. She introduced herself as Sarah MacLeod, the driver on whose bus Cassidy's wallet had been stolen years earlier, a guilt shadow she said never lifted. She had recognized Cassidy in the documentary and wanted to apologize. Cassidy, tending tomato vines nearby, heard her name, came over, and embraced Sarah before she completed her sentence. There was nothing to forgive, Cassidy said. The flat tire had been fate's compass. Luke watched. Awed yet unsurprised kindness multiplied, often circled back in stranger shapes. Late autumn paints Tennessee gold, and by November Barrett Farm glowed. Luke installed a cedar bench on the ridge, where the walnut overlooked the valley, carving Clara's initials beside his. Cassidy joined him sometimes at dusk, humming melodies as sun stretched shadows across clover. One evening she unpacked legal papers, explaining she'd created a trust, securing a portion of her song royalties to the Heartland Fund in perpetuity, ensuring the initiative thrived long after media glitter dimmed. Luke hesitated to accept, but Cassidy insisted, reminding him she already owed the farm 2 lifetimes of inspiration. First frost snapped the clover, signaling winter and Molly's approach home again. She returned brimming with research proposals on mobile veterinary clinics. During a family supper lit by oil lamp, She pitched converting Luke's old horse trailer into a rolling treatment bay for underserved haulers. Luke, always cautious, asked about funding. Molly produced spreadsheets and a small grant letter from the state extension office. Cassidy volunteered tour bus welding staff during their off-season. Plans set, they shared blackberry cobbler, while tractors snored beneath the table. Snow finally blanketed fields on Christmas Eve, heavy wet flakes that hushed the world. Luke woke early Christmas morning, retrieving the engraved, never-stranded wrench from its hook. He drove the old Ford down Barrett Road, the sunrise painting icicles orange. At the highway junction, he stopped at the exact spot where Cassidy's tire had exploded 2 years prior. He placed the wrench on the guardrail, tied with a note. "If you need this, take it. Pay forward if you can. LB." Then he left it, trusting the road to use the tool wisely. Back at the farm, Molly, Cassidy, Dr. Patel, and a handful of neighbors prepared brunch. Ty streamed in on a tablet from a set in Kansas, waving a spatula. Wayne arrived with cider pressed that morning. They gathered in the barn, now festooned with white lights twinkling off new rafters. Cassidy strummed a gentle version of "Tomorrow Learns to Breathe," while snow sifted through cracks she intentionally left for ambiance. During the final chorus, Luke added low harmony, blending so smooth even he startled. When the song concluded, Cassidy announced her acoustic album, titled Roads and Roots, had debuted at #1 on the Americana chart. She dedicated its success to the Barretts, producing a framed platinum digital plaque that would hang beside the drone photograph. Luke accepted, but reminded everyone that the real plaque gleamed outside. Green shoots visible even beneath snow where earthworms turned clover residue into next year's nutrition. That afternoon they shared gifts. Molly received a stethoscope etched with clover vines. Luke a pair of handmade leather gloves stitched by Mrs. Caldwell. Cassidy a jar of honey labeled batch number Clara. They toasted with sparkling cider, laughter echoing like grain pouring into a wood bin. Night settled, cold and silent. Luke stepped outside alone. The sky an infinite coal seam drilled with diamond stars. He inhaled crisp air scented faintly with smoke from his own chimney. On the ridge, the bench stood watch, snow frosting the carved initials. Luke imagined Clara seated there, approving smile soft in moonlight. He whispered, "We did right," and felt warmth spread despite the cold. Later, as he stoked the fire for the night, his phone buzzed with a photo attachment. The guardrail wrench missing, replaced by a Polaroid of a young couple stranded with a smoking radiator, smiling while holding the wrenchy bee. Like a trophy. On the back of the image they had scribbled, "Fixed our leak. Headed to Grandma's. We will pass it on. Thank you." Luke chuckled, sliding the photo under a magnet on the fridge between Molly's childhood drawing of goats and a note listing seed order numbers. The chain of quiet generosity remained unbroken, traveling anonymously along dark highways. And that, Luke knew, was the true harvest, not ratings or grants or even regenerated soil, but a lineage of humble acts, slipping hand to hand across distance and time, each gesture planting a fearless sprout of hope in the next traveler's heart. He banked the fire, whispered goodnight to the dog curled by the hearth, and climbed the stairs as snow whispered against the panes, carrying forward the lullaby of roads that remember kindness and fields that never forget to bloom. Thomas Wilkins